Hi, Justin here to show you about RigD pipelines. There's several different activities related to RigD pipelines. We're going to walk through a few of those today. To get started, let's go ahead and look at some simple Lambda function code we have here, which just responds with hello world. We'll go ahead and run this inside of RigD using invoke Lambda function, and we'll include the function name. We don't have any optional inputs, so we'll choose no. This will execute, and we get back a simple hello world response. Now let's look at the history for what we've run. And when this comes back, we will see that we've got a variety of things we've previously run. What we're most concerned about is the last one, number 50. So we're going to go ahead and create a pipeline using that activity. Call our pipeline HW-test. Now we're going to go ahead and choose 50 for our activity. And we will have a pipeline with one activity, which is invoke our Lambda function. Now let's go ahead and run that and see what we get. And there you have it. We've got our hello world response from the execution and an indication that our pipeline is now complete. Okay, so let's move on to some more advanced scenarios using pipeline. We'll go ahead and start by making a change to our code here. Instead of just simply printing a default response, we're going to take an event input and also raise an error in the event of an issue. So we'll go ahead and push this change. Now let's go ahead and switch back to Slack, and we're going to go ahead and run the build. We've already got a build set up, which is called Hello World, so we're going to go ahead and run that. We also don't need any additional inputs, so we'll choose no, and go ahead and run that. This will take a little bit of time to run, so we'll skip ahead, see that the build succeeded, and now we'll go ahead and update our Lambda code. Again, the name of the Lambda is Hello World, so we'll choose that name. Then we're going to go ahead and specify the bucket and the zip file that includes the code. Also don't need any additional options, so we'll hit no, that will execute, and we'll see that the code has been updated. Now let's show an example of running that Lambda including the event info. So we'll run Lambda function hello world. In this case I use run instead of invoke, and that still works fine. We are going to add some options. We don't need a qualifier because we don't have an alias for this Lambda. We're going to skip the invocation type because it always defaults to request response, which is what we want to do here. Now we're going to go ahead and add a code snippet for the event payload. So we'll choose snippet, we'll add our JSON here, and this will be auto-detected as JSON. And next optional input, we are going to choose to tail the logs, so we'll hit 2 to tail the logs. And we don't need a client context, so we'll just simply skip over that. And we can see from the results that we had the name included, hello RigD, and we also see details in the log of the event. Now let's go ahead and update our pipeline to include this Lambda run in the test pipeline. So we'll choose update pipeline, number 2 for add, and then we're going to add activity number 50, which is the last one we just entered. We don't need an entry here because we're going to add it to the end by default. That process, and then we can see our pipeline here now includes both of those Lambda runs. Now let's go ahead and rerun our pipeline and see the results from both executions. Notice the first one there returns with an error as a result of the event not having a first name. And the second one returns just fine with the hello RigD because we included that as our name. I'm going to go ahead and bring up the history here, and we're going to go ahead and set up a slightly more complex pipeline. We're going to call this pipeline HW update, and this is effectively going to run the build and update the Lambda and then execute the pipeline for our tests. So we'll go ahead and choose 44 through 45 and 50. Now you'll notice there that pipeline actually also includes another pipeline. You can do nested pipelines with RigD. Now the other thing you can do with the pipeline is also have it run based on a trigger. And those triggers can be code commits to a code pipeline repository. So we'll go ahead and set one up here for our Hello World example. We're going to name it code push, and then we're going to choose our Hello World code commit repository. And we don't need to specify a branch because we're going to use just the default branch. So that'll go ahead and set up, and now we've got a trigger. Let's go ahead and fire that by making another change to our code. For this scenario, we'll go ahead and add in a try and except to handle those errors, so when we run without an event, we don't get a Lambda failure. We'll go ahead and make the change, push the change, and now if we go back and watch in our Slack channel, after just a few seconds, we will see the pipeline actually being triggered. And here you go, we see it starting by running the build. And after the build completes, and it starts executing through the other steps one at a time, with an indication for each step that it's moving on to the next one. If your pipeline did fail at any point, the pipeline would stop so that it doesn't continue on to the next steps. So if we look back, we can see that we were successful in executing both Lambdas, as well as obviously the code was updated and the build succeeded. This is a great example of a fairly complex pipeline running through builds, deploying, and executing a couple of tests. You could obviously add far more tests if you had a more complicated pipeline. If you ever want to see the details on a particular pipeline, you can do get pipeline and the pipeline name. So that's it for RigD pipeline. Quick and easy pipeline development without any coding.